For the nation, by the nation. Islam Alive Radio.
Assalamu alaikum listeners. Today is Saturday the 30th of March. The time is 3 p.m. South African time. I'm your host Aashiqah Regal, reporting from Cape Town, South Africa. This is the show Liberation Education. I'm so overjoyed to be live with my co-hosts Zaynah, Allie. Zaynah and I had done joint interviews before, and we also discussed chapters together such as Muslim women representation. She did take a break. She was busy with her exams and focusing on academics, but today she's back with me. I've missed your voice on the show, Zaynah. How are you doing? I'm good, alhamdulillah. I'm so glad you're with us, and yes, it's just so great that you're on with us to discuss an important topic. To our listeners, shukran for being tuned to Islam Live Radio. Remember, you may check us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, where you can like, share, and subscribe. For any queries, email us on islamalive@gmail.com, or you can send us a WhatsApp on +27 81 217 6012. That is +27 81 217 6012. Disclaimer: the views and opinions of Islam Alive Radio expressed by any guest or presenter are not necessarily the views of Islam Alive Radio. Previously on Liberation Education, Chapter 11, we interviewed Anthony Svelto from Cape Town, South Africa, who has climbed to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the tallest mountain in Africa, to raise the Palestinian flag. And when I was talking to Anthony last week, he mentioned the diverse identities of his life, ranging from him being a South African man, with his parents being Moroccan, Italian, French, who worked around Africa, including Congo, and how he traveled to study in America and European countries, engaging with native communities and underprivileged areas. And he became an architect to challenge climate change and sustainability and animal abuse. So these range of perspectives allowed him to recognize injustices around the world, including Palestine, and that what led him to place the Palestinian flag on top of Africa's highest mountain. And that also brought about a question of intersectionality, which is the topic that Zaynah and I will be talking about today, this intersectionality of injustices. And we found this quite important to understand all that is happening around the world, or injustices around the world, and how it comes together. And you're probably wondering, what is intersectionality? And I'll explain the definition to you now. It's acknowledging that we have our own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, like our individual selves, and we consider everything and anything to marginalize us. But we also recognize the identities that connects us together, but also separates us from one another. So, Zaynah, what do you think about this? What is your opinion about this?
Experience Allah Ta'ala makes it so that we can help ourselves, each individual. That's why we all go through different things, because maybe you won't be able to go through something, maybe being black or something like that, being dark. So that's why you're not that kind of, because maybe you wouldn't be able to handle that, you know what I mean? Or being blind, maybe you wouldn't be able to handle that. So that's all did us all so differently. And all the things that we go through and we went through, whatever, that's different for everyone. And the way we are created shows. To be so boring if we all look the same and we all went through the same thing. Just think about it. But yes, that makes us unique. So yeah, that's what I think.
Oh, you mentioned something about how your mother said. I didn't quite catch that. The system didn't quite catch that. Can you repeat what your mother said to you about this different identities?
That's to our capabilities.
That's very true, and we all have an individual path, it's true, and we all have our unique experience, our unique perspectives as well. And it's good to recognize that we are different. At the same time, recognize what makes us come together. And when Zaynah and I researched about intersectionality, we found these many diagrams, or I'd say bubbles, of different identities. And there were actually a number of different categories that could not categorize also label us, but that allows us to understand these identities. And I will explain some examples. Your race, your gender, age, ability, personality, culture, nationality, appearance, language, occupation, job, religion, class, location, education, hobbies, political stances. All these together, and there's much more, all these together make up a variety of your individual identity. And it's actually crazy to see from these, I'm putting in quotation marks, bubbles of intersectional identities that prove how we are so different from one another, but how we also connect with one another. And yes, before we go into the injustice part of this, I want to explain the bubbles just briefly in detail as we go along. So ability, Zaynah, do you want to speak on ability and how this can possibly lead to an injustice or discrimination of that part?
So, only the Allah created us all with different abilities. Not all of us can see, can air, feet walk on, and all of those things. Now, as you know, also, how can I say, you get Down syndrome people that are not 100% Down syndrome, and sometimes you will see people make fun of them and, how can I say, make them feel one-sided, and they also don't look like they're also human, they also have feelings. What if even that person would shame?
That's so true. And I understand like what you mean by that. In fact, I watched a video, and it was about this Down syndrome girl, and she was explaining how if you see me in a certain way, I will continue to be in that way. For example, if you see me as a child and treat me as a child, then I'll never, act like in the standard of my age, basically, like that type of mentality. And so how you mentioned that people can be discriminated for how they are born, their abilities. It's very true. Same with mental health, how the stigma behind mental health can affect how you are viewed. Then we move on to someone's race or gender. And we know this already from people in South Africa, how we struggle from apartheid upon black people. And with gender, in our times now, we know that women are targeted in the society in terms of femicide and what's happening in the world. You can't go outside, you feel that you're not safe. And then we have nationality. Like you said, my experience will be different from maybe another Muslim's perspective. In the case of a black Muslim woman, her experience would be different from me in terms of her bubble, I'm putting it in quotation, her bubble being race. It's not similar to how I experience being discriminated on race because I'm not a black woman. And so it's just these multiple like levels of intersectionality of identity that we have to recognize and understand the differences between, and also one's occupation. Like when it is honestly true when we say people can be discriminated on the job that they have or the position that they take in a job. One's religion, obviously we can be discriminated against for the religion we are in or the class that we are in, such as rich versus poor. And another bubble that we saw was that of location, which is quite interesting because location infers climate change and what we see in environmental differences. Take Constantia, for example, versus Kailicha, and you can see in your mind already the difference between an impoverished land versus those that have been privileged for a long time. But now we actually shift these bubbles and how someone can experience individual discrimination and oppression, and we take it to the global sphere. We take injustices around worldwide. How do we see all these identities being marginalized in the bigger picture? And yes, Zaynah, do you want to speak on the injustices around the world, how these bubbles can lead to the troubles or the movements that are being spoken on in this world?
South Africa, right? There's a lot of poor areas and things like that. So I research and I've seen that South Africa has the highest rate of rape in the world. And anything like is shocking. I don't know. Even though I come from a poor area, right? So even in this week, someone came to me and they told me that 4 of the children has been raped, like from their uncle. And that is so scary, you know what I mean? Because you person's family, and that is happening. And 8 months ago, this girl, she was 14 years old and she got shot by a boy who cheated him. You know? And so, yeah, the area that how can top of each other, such areas here in South Africa. So we struggle with its own. Yeah.
When you mentioned those perspectives, like my jaw dropped, because the fact that these things are happening in Cape Town, South Africa right now, and it's so scary how normalized it is, the rape rates, the rates of crimes that we have against women in South Africa, and how frequent it is. And it just speaks on those identities of gender and location, because I mean, this is happening for gender-based violence within partners, like your intimate partners, your family, and not only strangers as well. I think you probably heard about what happened with Uyenene at UCT, a UCT student. And
No.
okay, so what happened was there was the student at UCT, and she went to the post office. The post office there by Claremont, and it's next to a police station. I keep this in mind. It's next to a police station. She goes into the post office, and this is when a man comes up to her and he assaults her, and we find out she was murdered and raped. And basically, I forgot what happened with her body, but this was a shocking story. They're next to a police station, this post office, and it happened there. And it was such a shocking revelation in terms of, well, it's actually not a revelation because it's been happening. This femicide, this killing of women, and how dangerous it is for women in South Africa. It's just this system that doesn't have, justice majority of the time when it comes to rape, or they take it to the police, and many times the case isn't solved for women who have been assaulted. And it's just heartbreaking how these movements came to be. Like, I think it was the Me Too movement, in which stands up for women basically that are under constant femicide and constant rapes and these discrimination against women. And another point I want to make is that of racism. We talked about apartheid in South Africa, and we heard about the story of George Floyd in America, how a policeman suffocated him by putting his knee on his neck, and then he died. He was murdered. And that's how the Black Lives Matter movement was enhanced, because of the protests against the police, because black people weren't being treated fairly. Same with the Stop Asian Hate. Recently, there was also a protest of, against Asian hate and discriminating against Asian people. Another is obviously Islamophobia. Zaynah, you and I spoke about Muslim women representation and how we see in I think it was chapter 2, and we spoke about this from the beginning already, how Muslim women aren't given the representation that we need, or Muslims in general are not given the proper representation on the media, because always something about terrorism or dehumanization of Arabs or immigrants, criminal offenses. Yes, and just that in itself. And also that of class. Do you want to speak on this, of Islamophobia and class? And
so he was an Arab, but at that time, the like rich and all of this stuff, they were very poor. So one of the reasons why the Jews did not accept Islam was because the Prophet wasn't of the progeny, of the line or whatever. So, the Prophet got a lot of hate because he was Arab, Even just that, and because he wasn't as rich and all of those things. So even though the Prophet, went through things, so, but that was one of it.
I love how you brought up the history of the Prophet and linking that to like class, like the rich versus poor, and distinguishing between that, because it's true that so many people get discriminated against because they don't have a higher status, because they don't have they don't have enough money, or they don't keep to a certain standard of income. And I'm glad that you related it back to the Prophet's time, how Muslims, many also happen to be a part of the underprivileged communities, and some Arabs at the time were not of high status. They just felt that Allah was sufficient for them and not the money or the wealth. And it's just a good connection to make in terms of, especially now that we're talking about intersectionality. There was another one I wanted to mention about injustices, and that's location. I think I mentioned it already, but how there are certain areas even in Cape Town that have such a difference in environmental, like the environment and how it is kept. For many people in Constantia, I was actually talking to about this with my friend, and we discussed how we were actually like running in forested areas near Constantia, and we were discussing this, how it was a majority white area, and they constantly and frequently get people to clean up the area. And we were discussing, imagine if this were to happen in spaces like Kailicha, or these impoverished areas that aren't taken as seriously by people in power, people with the money and people with the wealth. And just for many of these impoverished areas, climate change isn't their main priority, is to survive. You know what I mean? So to see that intersectionality, to see that that understanding of class, location, and environmental discrepancies is important. Yeah, so we spoke a lot about these injustices around the world and how our identities relate to it. And it's great to see this bigger picture of discrimination and how people are treated differently from one another, so that we can also understand our privileges and act to alleviate these barriers that we've set between ourselves and other people. And even within countries, I mean, our own South Africa is already quite divided, and our inequality rates are so high. So imagine in countries as well, you see this divide. For example, in chapter 1, when I spoke about Islamophobia worldwide, this is one example of countries around the world that face discrimination in terms of their religion. Their identity of being Muslim is what I spoke about in chapter 1. Palestine, what's happening with people in Gaza right now. China, with the Uyghur Muslims. New Zealand, what happened with the Christchurch shooting against the Muslims in the church, in Christchurch Mosque. And Western European countries, what is happening with the hijab ban and media, the misrepresentation of Muslims in the media, and just all these levels of Islamophobia worldwide and the degrees of Islamophobia worldwide. And also with, like you mentioned, class, the rich versus poor. Do you want to speak on maybe how it can relate to the countries?
I didn't hear the first piece that you said.
Oh, okay. So I mentioned first remember chapter 1 when it was about Islamophobia worldwide, and Palestine, China, all these countries have Muslims in it that have historically been and are continuously being discriminated against because they are Muslim. And that's an identity that I'm packed for many countries that experience this. And then there's also like class. You mentioned class of the Prophet, how they were considered or treated unfairly because of their class and their status. And now we're dealing with countries around the world that maybe that had that stigma of being rich and poor. Like, how do we, see the differences between countries with class?
So, look at America, right? Everyone wants to go there because they just the best thing ever. And then you get South Africa, where people think that we're living in a jungle still, Of course we're not. But yeah, people actually think that until they obviously come to Cape Town. It's like Cape Town, South Africa, and they're like, okay, they are normal people, they speak English, So, that is one example of it.
That's true because, I see videos of Americans and they're trying to find countries in the world, but they are really struggling. Like, they are asked about South Africa and they just point to the whole of Africa. Like, it's very, and it shows how many developed countries or people in America or those, how you consider rich countries, see the world as revolving around them. And with South Africa, when they actually travel the world, like you see when they come to Cape Town or anywhere in South Africa, they're like, oh, they're actually quite, they have the same things we do. And that status and class stereotypes can also relate to like racism as well, because to us, hearing that can also be quite racist in terms of Americans thinking that all Africans are the same and stereotypes like that. But for what happened with George Floyd and the protests in America right now, or I think that protest, the Black Lives Matter protest, I forgot what year it was in. It was quite recent, but yeah, I was talking about the racism against people in America and the West European countries. Even in South Africa, we have case of xenophobia, when some immigrants would come to South Africa from neighboring countries and they'd be harmed here. Like, we have to recognize that as well. Xenophobia is also, like the fear of immigrants is also something we have to acknowledge in European and Western countries as well, the fear of immigration. And that's why the Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate movements came about, to challenge this, white supremacy. What was the last point I wanted to mention? That of gender. I think we also spoke about that already. What happened in South Africa with your experiences, and also that case with Uyinene. And in chapter 2, we spoke about Muslim women representation as well, and the hijab ban, and those, what happens in Western European countries, but also in Muslim countries. What do you think about that with like gender in different countries?
Especially in countries where all of those things, and even stuff Islamic countries, like I'm not even gonna lie, Muslim countries. Like even I mentioned last time in the other talk that we had that the women were recently get a license,
Mm.
And they're not allowed to wear like hijab at all. So yeah, that is Islamophobia, but also the other way around. You understand?
Yes, you actually did explain that in the Muslim women representation talk. Yeah, and how it can go both ways, because we're suffering not only through sexism, but we also can suffer through Islamophobia with the hijab ban. So in both ways, we are on this tightrope of injustices, and it's like facing both, discrimination, forms of discrimination, because in Muslim countries, women are forced to wear the hijab, and in non-Muslim countries, they are forced to remove the hijab. So I think the problem itself is in policing women's bodies in general. That's what we spoke about in chapter 2, and how we also critiqued white feminism that only focuses on the surface level of women's rights, like like, for example, abortion rights, and of course, we acknowledge these struggles, and for example, reproductive rights, and fighting against rape, and fighting against these horrible femicide against women. But on the same time, like, I would notice that these conversations of women's rights doesn't exactly like, they wouldn't mention the women in Gaza, or they wouldn't mention the women in Congo and those that are suffering through colonialism, and impoverished lands that are suffering as well. And that's when it comes to, white feminism, as in, put the same energy that you have for women in these countries to women that are suffering because of, apartheid and colonialism and genocide and massacres and etc., 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 by powerful nations like America and Europe and Israel. Right. So we spoke a lot about intersectionality, the definition, we defined it. We spoke about injustices around the world relating to these bubbles of identity, such as racism, your race, your religion, your class, location, your gender. We spoke about countries that experience these for Islamophobia and racism around the world, and the classes, the gender discrepancies. So we've spoken a lot about these already. We'll be taking a short break for ads and qasidas by Muslim Sounds again, and then we'll be continuing with Liberation Education Chapters 12 on Islam Alive Radio. Sit back, relax, and see you after the beat.
St. Luke's Combined Hospices are dedicated to providing compassionate palliative care to on average 600 patients every day and need your help to continue its mission. Join us on Sunday, 31st of March from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Pledge your support, big or small, and help us significantly impact the lives of those facing terminal illnesses. Your pledge enables us to offer comfort, dignity, and support to palliating patients and their families. Pledge day telephone 087 2655045 or WhatsApp 079 215 1412.
Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, I hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones.
But I'm in the trees, I'm in the breeze, my footsteps on the ground. You see my face in every place, but you can't catch me now. Through waiting grass, the months will pass, you'll feel it all around. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere, but you can't catch me now. No, you can't catch me now. You can't
Greetings from Islam Alive Radio. I'm your host Aashiqah Regal with my co-host Zaynah Allie on Liberation Education Chapter 12, Intersectionality of Injustices. We defined intersectionality as well as the injustices using these identities around the world like racism, class, etc. We spoke about countries that are suffering with discrimination against these identities. And now we are moving on to I'm going to give it this mic to Zaynah, and she'll be speaking on the Islamic perspective of these injustices and protests around the world.
Died for God and bearers of so is not. We need to stand our values, our justice, being equal. Can't just sit there quiet when we see things are going wrong, and like up. And the hadith is found in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Whoever of you could change a bad thing, then change it with your hands. And if you are unable to change it with your hands, then change it with your mouth. And if you are unable to change it with your mouth, then dislike it in your heart." And that is the weakest form of Iman. And this person, Aaron Bush, what's his name?
Bushnell.
Yeah. So he was a member of he was an active member of the US Air Force, and who set himself on fire to protest the genocide that is happening in Gaza. So, in Islam, we're obviously not allowed to kill ourselves, but Aaron is not a Muslim, so he obviously doesn't follow the law. But we should think about what he did and why he did it, because this is an extreme form of protest. And he definitely wanted everyone to see the evil that is happening in the world. And doing that, killing yourself, that must have come from a very desperate place, in the heart, that he chose to do something like that. And we should really take this as an example for us, as a lesson that we should feel what he was feeling. Because, he's a non-believer and he is feeling this for Palestine, for Gaza, whatever. And even in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala described how the Prophet ﷺ felt when the people wrong. So in Surah Kahf, verse 6, فَلَعَلَّكَ آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا, which is, Allah Ta'ala says, it was as though he was going to kill himself in his grief. So people were sinning in his time. And Aaron is a great example. He literally did that act, but we can't. But we should feel that way. And that's what I have to say.
I'm glad that you mentioned that ayah, and you also mentioned Aaron Bushnell, because it's true that self-immolating yourself is an extreme form of protest compared to the Palestine marches and the boycotting of McDonald's and Starbucks. He literally put his life on the line, and as a veteran, as a veteran of the US military, and he made the statement literally before he died, free Palestine, free Palestine. That is a powerful statement to make while you are setting yourself on fire. And what was even more powerful and even more deep was when, while he was being burnt, I think it was someone from the Israeli embassy, a policeman, he was holding up a gun while Aaron was burning. I don't know if you saw that part of it. nothing sums up America more than that, because like that was insane. Like watching that, just that extreme form of protest, as well as that signifying part at the end that basically shows how they don't, like, these systems don't care really about the people, but their own agendas with the Israeli lobby and all these systems. And
like we really used to those things that we have to boycott now. Like Starbucks and whatever. But you know, teach us self-restraint and equalness, you know, since we're talking about intersectionality. So equalness also falls in there. And yeah, so boycotting, it is difficult. And just thinking the month of Ramadan, we still sin, we still do a lot of things, but why is that? Shaitan is locked up, he is chained up, but yet we are still sinning. And why? Think about before man was created, Shaitan itself, who was spitting his ears, like how did he become Shaitan, you know? So it was because of his nafs. His nafs led him to do such things. So, you know, we have that, we have our nafs, and the things that we have to boycott, sometimes it's really difficult. Literally, it's very difficult. Every time we just like, okay, one last drink, one last milkshake, one last burger, you know, we tell ourselves that all the time. But look at Prophet Lut, his wife, when Allah Ta'ala commanded him to leave. But yes, he left whatever, but his wife, she still had that, you know what, oh my God, that desire, you know. And Allah Ta'ala said, whoever looks back is going to destroy them also. And she looked back and she turned into stone. So imagine that happened to us every time we say, okay, no, this is our last burger, this is our last this. We don't get that much, but imagine that happened to us every time we do something like that, you know. So yeah, even now fasting, it's supposed to be like, supposed to eat less, but you know, just control the way we eat, everything. But when we break, we feast. Like a poor person, if they now come at the end of the day from people or whatever, do you think they're having a whole feast? You know, so we need to also think about such things, you know, in our actions. We must stop being of those that speak and say this and say that, and we must do it in our actions, our daily lives. Now that it's the month of Ramadan, I'm just here to remind everyone.
Yeah, what you said reminds me of what Anthony Svelto said about this consumerist mindset. So what he says is, we are so consumed by, brands and spending money and the capitalist system that makes you eat and consume, and and especially now, like you see in the month of Ramadan, this is when we must have self-control against these things, against consuming, and that also relates like temptations. We have to get rid of these temptations, especially during this boycott. And that's why it's so important to have this boycott system now during the month of Ramadan, in a time of self-control against consumerism, and to understand what people, underprivileged communities, and those that are facing extreme hunger and starvation are feeling like right now, to develop that solidarity even more. And I know another boycotting method to understand the solidarity is social media, like spreading the truths of Palestine and IDF. What we are doing now with our radio show, also raising awareness and putting things on our statuses and online, how people use links. They say click the link to donate, and if you see the protests as well on social media, you'll see people from different communities that have historically been under colonialism and displacements, etc., like Native Americans, Irish people, South Africa now with the ICJ, Aboriginal people, Swedish natives, all these groups together on the side of Palestine. And it's like all these historically marginalized people on the side of Palestine. It makes you wonder how Zionists think that they're on the right side of history, because like it's crazy.
Yeah, that just got me thinking. In between that, or how can I say? What is the word? Neutral.
Yeah.
That word. Those people. Oh my god, they walk on my nose. I don't know. Because like you need to choose a side, especially as a Muslim, because we stand up for justice, justice. So like we can't just be like, oh, I'm in between, I don't care about such stuff. No, the right is right. Definitely wrong, and we need to speak up. Yeah, like it also got me thinking about, how he was scared to, even though he knew that it was the truth, he was scared of what people, Now that is us also. We caring about what people think. If I'm going to choose this side, then what are they going to do? If I choose that side, then what are they going to do? So we can't be like that. What happened to the Prophet's uncle? He never got the opportunity to turn Muslim, and he's going to be punished for that. So,
your point of neutrality reminds me of Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, if you want to demand freedom, then you cannot be neutral. Because, it's like, and another quote by, I think, Desmond Tutu, if you're neutral in the time of injustice, then you have chosen the side of the oppressor, right? So, like you said, if people say I'm on the line, I'm on the fence, basically, then we do have to, consider all the historical people that have been marginalized and all those people that have been on the fence. How did it turn out back then? And that also leads to this idea of double standards of injustices. Okay, before we get onto that, I feel like we spoke a lot on these different protests and boycotting and this Islamic perspectives and neutrality. So we'll be taking another short break for a little bit, and we'll be continuing with Liberation Education Chapter 12 on Islam Alive Radio. And we'll see you after the beat.
Southern Hill Gas and Hardware. If you'd like to purchase any size gas tank or even refill your gas tank, needing any screw or hammer and some sort of building equipment, visit Southern Hill Gas and Hardware in Southern Hill Drive, Lavender Hill. Islam Alive Radio is sponsored by Southern Hill Gas and Hardware, Cape Town, South Africa.
لا نحتاج المال كي نزداد جمالا جوهرنا هنا في القلب تلالا لا نرضي الناس بما لا نرضاه لنا حالا ذاك جمالنا يسمو يتعالى لا نحتاج المال كي نزداد جمالا جوهرنا هنا في القلب تلالا لا نرضي الناس بما لا نرضاه لنا حالا ذاك جمالنا يسمو يتعالى
خلص الحكي شو بعد تقول خلص البكي والقلب مجروح بعيدي هيك عم وابعت سلام غسل زيتون.
Greetings from Islam Alive Radio. The time is 15:54. I'm your host Aashiqah Regal with co-host Zaynah Allie on Liberation Education Chapter 12, Intersectionality of Injustices. We spoke on so much and we still have a lot to talk about, but we will be wrapping up for the rest of the session. We are continuing from boycotts, protests, from injustices, as well as the stance on being neutral in times of injustices, which also leads to double standards of injustices, which is quite a heavy topic as well. But when we talk about double standard, it means you say you are a part of the struggle when one group gets hurt, but not when another group gets hurt. For example, this idea of what we mentioned before, white feminism, how many American politicians or female politicians would talk about the hijab ban, abortion rights or reproductive rights, and how women today are struggling with what's happening around the world of femicide, but also don't take into account what's happening in Palestine. But the outcry for Ukraine and countries such as these considered white European countries, the outcry for what's happening in Russia and Ukraine is so loud when it comes to America fighting for women's rights and fighting for the rights of these people, but not when it comes to a Muslim majority country such as Palestine, or a black majority country such as Congo and other African nations like Sudan and etc. So just that idea of hypocrisy. Also with climate change, how climate activists sometimes are all about environmental animal abuse and go vegan, all these different levels of activism. But when it comes to the animals in Gaza, the bombing and starving of animals and no sign of life or ecosystems and the environmental degradation in Gaza, then often or sometimes those same activists don't speak up. Why? But that's why we look to youth like Greta Thunberg, who is a climate activist and who spoke up on pro-Palestine and who spoke on corporations that causes pollutions are the same corporations that feed to McDonald's and Starbucks and these nations that add to the colonialism, that add to the genocide. And Greta Thunberg spoke about capitalist, dismantling this capitalist powers, and how these powers have control over internet and adverts, and they create, how Zaynah said to me before, how they create trends to occupy our brains, and it distracts us from issues caused by governments for money, greed, control, wealth, power. And that also led to the TikTok bans recently. I think many people know about this, the TikTok ban from politicians, and how they're trying to censor the youth, and when they speak up on boycotting and speaking up for Palestine, and how we should resist these systems of power. And it reminds me of this hadith, or not hadith, but a part of the Quran. It was a verse that mentioned how they say we are the peacemakers, but they're actually the corruptors and don't realize it. So it's just the idea that they say one thing, but actually they don't realize that the intention is the opposite, and they have their own agenda causing this disturbance of peace, not actually peacemaking. And it begs the question, now that we understand these levels of abuse of power and how this intersectionality of injustices relate to one another, Zaynah, where do we go from here now that, racism and gender and all these identities are being discriminated against in this world, and so many people abuse power against people of these communities? What do we do from here besides the boycotts, tell me.
So, what I think is that we should all see ourselves as like equal, and obviously our differences make us unique, but that we are equal, we are one ummah, so that if one person gets hurt in this ummah, we all get hurt, we all feel the pain, we should all share and show empathy and things like that, and that is what I think. And we should keep our mouth, because that is what the understanding is, that we should believe fully with our hearts, and we must stand up for injustice, So yes, if you see anything wrong, try and help out, post it, do whatever you can. Don't just be quiet about it and just watch, because those that watch it evil, those that watch people committing sin and doing evil, it's like they're doing it also. So yes, keep posting, keep sharing. So us also, speaking about it, we also doing an amazing job.
The youth, including what they're doing in general, and especially what in social media. You and I are also a part of this change and this shift of speaking up against wrongs. Historically, systems of power would try this divide and conquer method to break up communities so that they can control them better. But now it's like we're coming together because we understand that we suffer from the same systems of power that separate us. And you should keep boycotting the protests and raising awareness, because whatever instead of you dividing and conquer, we should actually unite together and prosper as a nation, prosper as a youth, prosper as a generation that can make change in the society. And alhamdulillah, it has reached the perfect timing and the perfect end for chapter 12 of Liberation Education. I'm going to ask Zaynah to end us off for intersectionality of injustices by making a little dua for us.
Okay, may Allah make it easy for all of those that are suffering from any form of discrimination, and know that Allah Ta'ala is with you no matter how much money you have, no matter what color you are, no matter where you're from, anything like that. And the dua of an oppressed person is always been accepted, and Allah is with you. So yes, especially the Palestinians, So inshallah, Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen.
Ameen. Shukran, Zaynah. And shukran to our listeners for being a part of, listening in and raising awareness and educating yourselves on these matters, whether it be intersectionality of injustices, whether it be representation or any of the systems of power that we want to dismantle in this world. Shukran for listening in. Shukran for educating yourself. Shukran for putting a hand in to, resist these powers of oppression and discrimination. And especially now, especially in these times of hardships, it's really important to fight, divide and conquer with unite and prosper. Shukran for tuning in to Islam Alive Radio. Remember, you may check us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram and YouTube, where you can like, share and subscribe. For any queries, email us on islamaliveradio@gmail.com or send us a WhatsApp on +27 81217 6012. That's +27 81217 6012. Shukran for being tuned, and shukran Zaynah. I missed you so much, and I'm glad we had this conversation. It's really important conversations we're having, and I'm so glad that we got to discuss it on air. And salam to all our listeners on Islam Alive Radio. For the rest of the session, I'll be playing that I would have played for the rest of the session. But yes, all these songs, all these qasidas relate to our discussions on defeating resistance and the beauty of our identities, how we don't need wealth and money, when Allah is sufficient for us, the solidarity of people, this idea of peace, and there's no justice without peace. So all the songs that I'm playing is about the intersectionality of injustices and the topics that we have spoken, Zaynah and I have spoken about today. So shukran for being tuned to Islam Alive Radio. Sit back, relax, and shukran for being loyal and listening in for chapter 12. Intersectionality of Injustices. Shukran.
Islam Live Radio is sponsored by Al Muqeed Foundation South Africa. Would you like to donate cash or kind towards feeding our children and people? Contact the following number: +27 66 33 99 775. Al Muqeed Foundation, South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa, serving the humanity.
Even the comatose, they don't dance and tell. We live in cities you'll never see on screen. Not very pretty, but we sure know how to run free. Living in ruins, silver palace within my dreams. And you know, we're on each other's team. We live in cities you'll never see on screen. Not very pretty, but we sure know how to run free. Living in ruins, silver palace within my dreams. And you know, we're on each other's team. We're on each other's team. And you know, we're on each other's team. We're on each other's team. And you know, and you know, and you know. هذا سلام فلما السلام ونظرة تؤلم قلبي في المنام. كلام بعد كلام وعين تنزف ماء في فضاء بين فضاء لا مكان له في الوجود. لم لا لم لا 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 لم لا لم لا 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 لم لا لم لا 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 لم لا لم لا 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 لم لا لم لا 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 لم لا لم لا 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 في أعالي السماء إلى جنة في أعالي السماء جمال الوجود بذكر الإله وتصفو الحياة بنور هدى. جمال الوجود بذكر الإله وتصفو الحياة
Assalamu alaikum from Islam Alive Radio. This is Aashiqah Regal again. The songs that you just heard, the first few was Stand Up by Cynthia Erivo, and this is about, it relates to the movements that are happening now worldwide with all the injustices like the Black Lives Matter movement, and just standing up against systems of oppression, and standing up for what is right through protests, through boycotts, etc. Then the next tune was The Beauty of Existence, which is about the beauty of identities and how our differences are beautiful, but also how we relate to one another and how we stand together. Another song was Kun Anta, and it was about how we don't need the greed, we don't need wealth and money, and we don't need to keep up with this consumerist mindset. You must just be yourself and Allah is sufficient for you. Then Tamalimak by Eliana. It's about how I am with you even if you are far away. So the solidarity of all people facing oppression worldwide and how we are still with them. Then Hazan Salam about this idea of, is this peace? The pain in my heart, the tears shed, peace feels like it doesn't exist. Why? No. Just translating. But it's about how injustice does not relate to peace, and this idea of double standards of being peacemakers when they're actually corruptors. Song by Mahim Ahmed. And lastly, Team by Lord. It was also covered by a Palestinian artist, Nemesis. But it's about how we are united, how we are together, and we are on each other's team.